So once you'd been modding for a while, like how did you move from that to actually working at the company that makes the game?
About 9 months after I started modding, I actually applied to get access to the Factorio source code.
Mhm,
This is a program that they offer where if someone has good enough reasons and enough interest, they can gain access to the source code
mhm,
and be able to contribute things.
mhm,
Not very many people get it because you have to have pretty good reasons.
mhm,
But I said, hey, I'm here. I've made these mods. I want to add more modding features so I can make better mods.
mhm,
May I have access to the source code? And they said yes. So I've had access to the source code for many years before I got hired.
mhm,
And that was a big boon for me getting hired because I had already interacted with pretty much everyone at the company by
mhm.
then. They already knew who I was. I'd already gotten familiar with the code base. So when I sent them my resume, they said, okay.
Like, wait, we didn't hire you already?
Yeah, that's another interesting story. My reason for applying to the company was because their Linux developer had left. There was one person that was openly the Linux guy
Mhm,
who did all the Linux support stuff for many years,
mhm,
but he eventually left the company to do other things. And so I saw there was an opening, even though there were no openings on the website. I knew that they were lacking a Linux guy, and I didn't want the Linux support to go by the wayside. So that's why I sent in my application.
mhm. So how long had they been without like a Linux developer, or was it just like basically right after that guy had left?
It wasn't right after. I think they were without a Linux developer for a year, but don't
Mhm,
quote me on that. I don't remember exactly when the previous guy left, but
mhm,
it was definitely in the back of my mind that whole time.
mhm.
I think the main reason I didn't do it immediately was because of imposter syndrome.
Sure.
And to be perfectly frank, I still suffer from imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So yeah, it took a little bit.
So during that period where they didn't have a Linux developer, were things starting to slide, or like what was happening, or is if there's things you can't say, obviously, like yeah, you can ignore that.
Oh no, we're fine. Things weren't necessarily sliding, but as you know, Linux is going through quite a bit of a revolution in recent years with Wayland and Pipewire and all the other things that
Mhm,
are starting to finally become good enough to use for everyone.
mhm,
Uh, but Factorio didn't have a dedicated guy who could go through and actually make sure all of these things were supported.
mhm.
So that's why I wanted to do it because I have a laptop that has fractional scaling on its screen, and I couldn't play Factorio on it without uh, turning the screen scaling down because it would be blurry.
Right, right. Well, the reason I bring up it sliding is because, like, there is this whole issue with dependencies when you have native applications where you need to make sure things are actually lining up correctly, or things are going to
Mhm.
start breaking. And I know there are things like a lot of things now that are statically linked, but there's always going to be some additional issues that happen just because you're making a native application.
Yeah, for sure. Thankfully, we've had pretty good foresight. Our deployment servers use a pretty ancient version of glibc, so you
Mhm.
can even run Factorio on CentOS if you want to. Uh, Not that that matters
What
anymore,
is the
but
minimum Linux requirement right now for Factorio, if you happen to know?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's see if we
I
can.
can look and see what version glibc it requires, though.
Yeah, if you know what that is, that'll give us an indication.
Well, I'm just running LDD on it, so we'll see. Lib. Nope, it doesn't tell me the version. Sorry, I don't actually know,
Mhm,
but right now, you can pretty much run it on anything
mhm.
that is reasonably up to date.
Okay. Well, yeah, I expect a reasonably up to date thing to work. I just wanted to know if you could run some like.
Oh, and also has all those dynamic dependencies.
Right, right, okay. Yeah, that's obviously the biggest thing. Um, so okay, you got the job doing Linux support,
Hmm.
and you were the Linux. You're just the Linux guy there now. So you're basically like, I did want to ask, like, how much control do you have over like what happens on the Linux side? Like, I assume there's obviously like somebody that's keeping an eye on what's happening, but like how does this work for you?
I pretty much have full free reign over what I do in terms of the Linux support.
Mhm,
Obviously, we do have some sort of organizational method.
mhm,
We have a big Trello board where we have all the tasks we need to do, and I'm expected to be working on those tasks. But
mhm,
one thing, I think my favorite thing about working at this company is we're also encouraged to work on anything we see fit for the benefit of the game.
mhm, mhm,
So for me, that includes the Linux support. So I am able to dedicate time to that whenever I want, basically.
Mhm. So is Linux support your main role, or is that just one of your additional roles?
I'd say it's one of my primary responsibilities.
Mhm.
We don't really have roles at the company. It's a very flat structure.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm just a game programmer, and all of us programmers share that same Trello board, but we all have our specialties. For example, if someone has an issue with Linux, it goes to me usually.
Right, right, right.
If someone has issue with sounds, it goes to Danyani. Someone has issues with the Nintendo Switch version, it goes to Twinsen.
Mhm.
But uh, overall, there's not like a hey, you're just doing these things. It's hey, do whatever we need you to do. Uh, unless you need help from someone else, then you can ask.
Right. Okay. Because I know in earlier posts you have discussed like working on modding stuff as well.
Yes, I think I forgot to mention that. I didn't mention it because I haven't been able to do that much. I've
Mhm.
been so busy with my Linux and game engine side of the programming that
Mhm.
I haven't had much time to dedicate to the modding
Mhm.
support in recent months. But that is something I intend to get back to once our expansion pack is released.
Oh, that's cool. So with the whole modding support, is there like difficulty? That's that was really bad pronounced. Are there difficulties with making sure it works consistently across like each of the operating systems? So I know that you guys support. There's a bunch of things you guys support now. There's obviously the Switch version is not going to have it, but Linux, Windows, and macOS. Is there issues with making sure the mods are working consistently, or has it been abstracted out enough where it's mostly fine and doesn't need additional work?
I'd say the modding API does add a lot of difficulty
Mhm.
overall. In terms of platform support, the biggest hurdle was actually ARM versus x86. Because when you get on the low level, there's a lot of small differences.
Mhm.
For example, I might be getting these backwards, so correct me in the comments if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But one of the platforms will, when you overflow an integer,
Mhm.
will wrap around to 0. The other platform will clamp it to the max value.
Oh.
So, because Factorio is a deterministic game,
Mhm.
everything has to match 100% between all clients or they get desynchronized and it kicks you out of a multiplayer game. So, we had to go through a lot of pain to make sure that all of the overflow, what's the word for it? All the times overflow can happen, we
Mhm.
check them and we apply our custom code to make it the same on all platforms.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to play multiplayer with someone on a different architecture.
So that's all stuff handled within like the modding API itself.
That's all stuff handled on the C++ side. In terms of mods,
Mhm.
mods have no access to the platform at all. They're completely sandboxed.
Mhm.
They only have access to the stuff that we give them, and that's all completely platform independent.
Okay, okay. That was going to be my next question. Whether
I
if
apologize. I kind of rambled on a bit
no,
there.
no, it's all good. Ramble as much as you want. It means I talk less. Um, I was going to ask if I was writing a mod, would I need to worry about the different platforms, or am I just targeting the specific game?
No, you don't need to worry about the platforms. All you need to worry about is making sure that you do the same thing on every client.
Mhm.
Uh, so as long as you don't do anything particularly stupid, you're okay.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. I wasn't sure how I guess powerful and how well developed the API was, but that definitely makes things considerably easier.
Yeah, one thing that's useful to know is like there's two different kinds of modding.
Mm.
Minecraft modding is basically a source code hack. They add their own source code on top of the Minecraft source code.
Mm.
Factorio's modding is an official API,
Mm.
so it's all within Lua scripts, and they can't access the C++ portion at all. They can't change any of that behavior.
Mm.
So they're completely confined to what we allow them to do.
Okay. So there are certain things that are just simply not possible to interact with using mods.
Exactly.
I guess that makes it a lot easier to ensure that multiplayer functions correctly then.
Yes, because with Minecraft, mods can do whatever they want. So if someone writes a mod that removes everything on your hard drive, then nothing you can do about it.
Mhm.
But the Factorio, we just don't give you access to the hard disk. You can
Mhm.
only require other Lua files. You can't even read like static text files or anything. That's
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
completely not accessible to you.
Hmm. Actually, speaking of Lua, this is random tangent, but I do want to bring it up because it is cool every time I remember it. With Supergiant's games, all of their Lua scripts are just available in the directory for their game, so you can just like read all of those, modify it. Like, it makes modding that game incredibly easy.
Yeah, that's the same with us. All of the Lua scripts are packaged with the game,
Mhm.
but they're not obfuscated in any way.
Okay. Do you does that mean including whatever whatever comments are in there? Because that's always fun to have a
Yes.
read of. Okay.
I don't think we have many.
Mhm.
Actually, there's one particular one. We have a utility function in the core Lua library that has no purpose. So someone wrote a comment above it somewhere that says, "But why?"
It's
I think
always,
that's my favorite comment in the code base.
it's always fun to see like whatever internal discussions have been happening because they just didn't strip any of that stuff out.
Yeah.
Like the Linux kernel is a good example of this. There is a website where it you can search for the use of specific terms over the years, and you'll see like if you search terms like fuck or shit, like there'll be spikes at certain points.